Here's the entrance to the sanctuary at Cedar Springs United Methodist Church. And as we go into the sanctuary, I'd like to point out one of my favorite aspects of this church is at the kind of welcome center in the sanctuary, at the back of the sanctuary, there is a working fireplace, which this is the first church where I've seen that in the sanctuary. And I certainly hope we are back in service for Christmas Eve, because I can just imagine a roaring fire and people waiting for the service around that fire. To me, that just means, that's just Christmas, right? So here's the sanctuary, and you can see the layout of the seats is for social distancing, though we haven't had a service with this particular layout, but we have sections for 3 people and singles and doubles kind of laid out here so that we can maintain social distancing. As we go to the front or back, however you want to look at it, the sanctuary here, we see there is the altar. Of course, there's the pianist and the organ over here. So here's the altar. And there's the pulpit from which I have yet to preach. I haven't had the opportunity yet to preach from this pulpit. What I normally do when videoing is stand in the center aisle, and I'll turn around. And I stand here in the center, and there is typically a video camera here. And this is what I see when I preach. I see empty seats, which I'll be honest is a little bit depressing. I have yet to preach in this sanctuary with people here. To date, all my preaching has been to a camera for this particular congregation. So that's the tour of this space. The biggest challenge that I have is the fact that when I preach, I don't get any personal feedback because I am preaching just to a camera and not to live bodies. So that's the challenge in this space. I can't wait till we're able to come in and utilize the fact that we have chairs and not pews so that we can do the social distancing in this fashion, which should add to the safety of the congregation. So that's Cedar Springs United Methodist Church. One thing I wanted to show you before we go into Kent City Chapel Hill United Methodist Church is this outdoor space, because this is the venue in which I preached last Sunday and will preach in the coming Sundays, since we are doing outside services as long as the weather holds. So I wanted to show you, if you can see here, up here is kind of a high spot where I stand, and then there's a slope, and then down in this area here is where the congregation is. So that presented a good opportunity to be up on a mount, if you will, which was nice. I could see everybody in the congregation. We didn't have a huge turnout, but it was okay. And this space presented some challenges. I had to tailor my message in the worship service to being outside, which was a little bit different. I had to make sure that I understood the dynamics of it, which worked out well. And we had an audio system that we purchased just for this purpose, and we made do. And it was actually quite a good service. I'll show you what we're looking out onto. And you can actually see there, that's where I live in the parsonage there. So this is the worship space for the next couple of weeks. And now we'll go inside and I will show you the sanctuary space from which I have preached, and I also videotape some messages. Okay, so as we enter the worship space here at Kent City Chapel Hill, the first thing you'll notice is there's pews here, in contrast to Cedar Springs, where there are chairs. So the space is less able to be modified for this particular time of worship. Now, per the congregation's request, if you will, or some people in the congregation, I preach in this space up here. So I don't preach from the pulpit right there, but I have been in the pulpit before during a funeral. And actually, I prefer being in the pulpit. I'll show you the look at the sanctuary. But in this particular sanctuary, if somebody's sitting off to this side, it can be obstructed. But here's the view of the sanctuary from the pulpit. And then the altar's here, pretty far behind me. So that leaves for less interaction with the altar. And then here's the view from where I typically stand, which is here in the aisle to preach. Now, most days, most Sundays, I am preaching to an empty sanctuary. We did have our outside service, this past one, as I had mentioned before, but this is what I'm seeing most days. And I have had indoor services here, a couple, and people are spread out. You do get this echo that you're probably hearing now because the space is mostly empty. So those are some of the challenges. Some of the other challenges to this particular space, like I mentioned, the altar being behind me, I don't get to interact much with elements that we may place on the altar, which I tend to do from time to time. Also, with communion, it makes it more difficult because I find myself back behind the altar, which is pretty far back, and I'm pretty far removed then from the congregation. I feel that way anyways. So here is Chapel Hill United Methodist Church and the worship space in which I present my sermons and the rest of worship.